there, and thanks for joining CREDC's Grow Clark County podcast edition. This is podcast 2, and I'm Marnie Farnes, the Relationships and Strategy Manager of CREDC. Today, we feature Carmen Nazorio, President and CEO of Vancouver's Eloyn International, which is a technology and management consulting company that provides technical and professional services to government and Fortune 500 companies. In this podcast, Carmen will guide us using relevant bits of information rooted in her entrepreneurial experience as she shares about strategic entrepreneurship. Carmen started her career in technology while serving in the U.S. Army during the Vietnam era. I can't say enough about Carmen and her passion for helping small businesses. One of her key professional focuses is mentoring women, minority, and veteran business owners. Regardless of who you are or where you're at in your business journey, there's so much to be learned from Carmen. A heartfelt thank you too to IQ Credit Union, Ryanette, and Allmade Apparel for their sponsorship of this podcast series. Because of their support, we're able to share these podcasts with everyone. Okay, on to podcast 2. Thanks for listening, and I hope you enjoy. Hello, Carmen.
Hello, Marnie. How are you today?
I'm great, thanks. Thank you so much for joining me.
And I want to thank you for hosting me. I'm excited about our event today, our podcast.
Yeah. Likewise. So last week I spoke with Stan Hanks, and he shared about forced innovation and how businesses are not only being forced to innovate right now, but how they need to continue to do so. And I'm so excited, Carmen, to talk with you today, where we're going to focus a little bit on strategic entrepreneurship. So, Carmen, I've already told listeners a little bit about you, but perhaps we can start with you sharing a little bit about yourself and a little bit about Eloyn International.
Sure. So let's see, a little bit about myself. So I'm originally from Puerto Rico, and I grew up in two cultures because I also lived as a little girl in New Jersey. And then we went back to Puerto Rico, and I did all my primary schooling and university as well. And at the time I was attending the University of Puerto Rico, I made a decision to join the Army, and that was during the Vietnam era war.
Oh, wow.
I joined the Army, and that got me into my career, which in the military I studied computer programming. So if you think of the movie Hidden Figures in the early 70s,
Yeah.
There's a little bit of that aspect in terms of my story as well. And then moved forward to 1997, I pursued after the military my career in computer programming in many different roles, growing into a project manager, when, I just had been thinking for quite a while about launching a company. And finally, I took steps to do that in 1997. So I've been in business now. I will be celebrating next month 23 years.
Oh, wow. That's awesome.
Thank
Love
you.
that. Yeah, thanks for sharing that. So, Carmen, I know that you enjoy mentoring other entrepreneurs. What would you say is the most common mistakes that you see entrepreneurs making?
I'll mention 3 of them. I think it's really important that when you start your company, you establish a good accounting system right away. And what I've seen in the past that people, they'll start a business and then 2 years later, they've never filed taxes. They got a box of receipts. They haven't been keeping good accounting records. They haven't paid their quarterly taxes or filed taxes. And that is very problematic. That can put you out of business right away. And so that's one mistake. Then I've seen that they haven't created a good business plan. And a business plan is a live document that you have to update all the time. And so that's really important to just create a plan, some kind of a plan, even if you don't have everything in perspective, but you do have to have some sort of a plan. And then the other thing I've seen is that people give up too quickly, and you know, you can't give up. And I think that's the biggest thing. I've seen all kinds of people come up with that I've mentored, and then because they didn't get things didn't happen within a year or less than a year, 6 months, they quit the business. They want to see instant success, and it doesn't work that way.
Right. And then you have things like a global pandemic, and boy, can that derail you.
Right. Yeah, there's all kinds of things that are happening today that really, you know, just about everybody's challenged, big, small, medium business and families. So it's just a different world today, definitely.
Yeah, it sure is. Yeah, that is a good segue into kind of the next question that I have for you. And I think it ties in nicely with not giving up, which obviously you've done so much growing up in Puerto Rico and then joining the military during the Vietnam era, and then continuing on to your career, and then of course with starting Eloyn, and that's a testament of just your resiliency. But yeah, can you share a time or two in your business when you were especially concerned that you wouldn't make it?
Right. So, and earlier when I started the company, I was the employee of the company for a year. And then I realized, hey, I'm never going to be able to grow or market my company if I'm doing the work. And I had incorporated, but so I had to rethink what was going to be my strategy, because I was trying to market part-time and then work full-time as the employee of the corporation. So I took a step of faith, and to be honest with you, yeah, that was really a big testing grounds, because things did not go as smooth, and I really had to persevere. And I was almost to the end of my rope when I finally landed a big opportunity that put me over. And so had I given up too quickly, I would have, you know, not fulfilled my passion or dream.
For sure. And so undoubtedly that that contract that you got was the result of a lot of hard work. But would you say that it was also just, you know, and I think this ties in again with resiliency, just like the planets aligning and your hard work, and it all just sort of came together? Or?
You know, it was the way it happened. It was right before Y2K, and I had a call out of the blue. So here I had been marketing, sending brochures, and you know, it was just the cusp of the internet too, because that was 1997. And so so I didn't even have a website. I used to mail and make these cold calls. But I got a call from the school district in Portland, and they said, one of the managers here, a friend of mine who knew I had started a company, told the manager about my company because they were in need of help. And so at that time, Portland Public Schools had a Bull computer. It was French, but it was equivalent to the IBM. And there was only 2 companies in Oregon that had that computer. And it was just being at the right place at the right time with the right training.
Sure, yeah.
I got a contract without me even putting a bid out, because I had also worked there years ago, and I knew their systems. And so it was a cold call, and it was like an answer to prayer, because I was really just very at the end of my rope. Yeah. And I was a single parent back then, so it wasn't like I had unemployment or a second income or anything like that. So
wow.
yeah,
That's impressive. So So with you as a woman in business, I'm thinking in terms of women and veteran and minority-owned businesses and businesses owned by other underrepresented population. What,
Right.
yeah, what challenges did you find that you faced, or what challenges do you find that others face that are unique to them?
Right. So I think I faced most of my challenges early on in my career, in the sense before I started my business, in terms of being, quote, a woman and Hispanic.
Mhm.
In the military, I graduated top in my two
Mm.
first computer classes, and the other soldiers would challenge me because I was smarter than they were. And this is not to toot my horn, but I graduated top in the class.
You
And
should
so
toot it. Go for it.
and so but I have noticed, that, even after I started my company, I had to compete. There's a lot of competition in my industry, and a lot of male-owned businesses, and a lot of companies that outsource. And so what I do see is there is quite a bit of stereotyping in terms of people of color,
Mhm.
um, and I haven't experienced it. Uh, maybe I have and not known it, but I have
Mhm.
seen it. I've been in a lot of venues because I belong to all of these organizations
Mhm.
where there's people of color, and I have seen that. And so I think one of the ways to overcome it is always, as a business owner, making sure that you are going to be better than everybody else in what you do. And I think
Mhm.
also too, you need to get involved in your community.
Mhm.
And I think volunteering so that people would get to know you in organizations may be of helps to people of color,
Mhm.
And that's one thing that I've done. Early on, I volunteered with the Minority Supplier Diversity Council in Seattle. But there's a lot of opportunities locally. There's a Chamber of Commerce, the Hispanic, and that I am also a member. So definitely, I do believe that there's still challenges for women um, and for people of color.
Mhm. Certainly. And they say that networking is always important, but I can see where it's especially important for certain populations or certain professionals, even more so than maybe others. It's important for everyone, but um,
Right.
yeah.
Yeah, and I agree that that does bring tremendous help. Networking and making sure you go to the events. Of course, now, it's a different story now, but it did help me a lot to get out, even just to Seattle, but locally to
Mhm.
everything the SBA offered, the chambers, there's AWAMI, there's all kinds of wonderful organizations that support
Mhm.
people of color and women-owned, and I am involved with all of them.
Mhm.
Yeah.
What any thoughts, and this is kind of like a side question, but any thoughts off the top of your head for veterans?
Veterans, well, I was hosting a veterans podcast for a year and a half. It's in Portland, and I'm saying I was because last
Mm-hmm.
week I told them I'm quitting for summer
Yeah.
every Friday. But what they did was they interviewed veteran enterprises. And so it was really good at a national level because then you got to share information and experiences from other veterans just in the same manner that you are
Mm-hmm.
interviewing me.
Yeah.
That's what I did with me and another veteran were doing it, and he's still going to do it. Um, and so with the veterans locally, the only thing I found other than this podcast, which is quite still new, it's probably 2 years
Mm-hmm.
or maybe a year and a half old, is the SBA, the functions that they would have for veterans,
Oh,
or
sure.
up north there's business conferences, government business conferences. There are nationally many conferences for veteran-owned enterprises that folks can, veteran-owned businesses can benefit from.
Very good. Thank you. Sorry, I kind of threw that question at you, but as we were talking, I had first mentioned veterans, and I just wanted to make sure that I didn't forget to kind of speak to what maybe some of their needs might be.
Oh, yeah.
So
that's a good question.
Yeah. So, Carmen, you mentioned funding and SBA. So curious, over the years, what kinds of funding opportunities have you sought out for Eloyn? And do you have any tips or thoughts to share?
Yes. So the first loan I got, or credit line actually, was an SBA credit line. And then at another time, I had what's called a Washington State link deposit, which is offered through the Office of a Minority and Woman-Owned Business Enterprise, Washington State. And so they have provision for low interest funding in partnership with banks. So the tips that I would offer is to identify the banks that get awards from the SBA, because that would tell you that they're friendly with small business. And I actually had to do that when the market, during the 2008 market the downturn. I had a credit line with Bank of America, and then all of a sudden all of the big banks decided they're not funding small business. So what I did was I went to see who got the awards for banking, banks for providing small business with credit, and I sought after that institution. So what I think is very important for businesses is to keep a good credit rating. Because if that will tarnish your ability to get any funding at all. So you have to always make sure that your credit line or your credit is good, so that you don't have to struggle with getting funding.
Yeah, I know that question came up a lot at the beginning of the COVID situation. I know we had SBA on one of our calls, and then some of the follow-up questions that I personally got through CREDC from businesses were questions like, what do I do about my credit? Or, what if my credit is just so-so? Or questions like, am I going to have to put my house up as security for my loan, and those types of questions. So, but the credit thing is something that I'm glad you mentioned that, because, it's tough, and but it's definitely something you want to think about.
Yeah, and even we have customers that when they're going to grant us a big contract, they want me to provide them information as term as my credit and banking, to make sure I have the right credit line, because they have to make sure that we can execute.
Right.
So it's vital.
Yeah. Good. So so in light of COVID, we couldn't get through this podcast without actually stopping to talk about it. But, of course, lots of businesses are struggling, as we all know. But any tips or ideas on how businesses might be able to be strategic or creative in finding opportunities in light of just kind of this big, giant downturn?
Right. Definitely, I believe it's a time to sort of examine your model of business and see what you need to do to adapt. And as an example, one of the first things that came to mind when there was no mask, I go, oh, people could just start a business just sewing it. And people did. They started new businesses sewing these masks, and now they even have for wedding and fancy ones with glitter. And my one of the things that I observe across the street from me, I try to patronize my local restaurant owner, and there's a minority restaurant owner who started doing Father's Day baskets by putting bottles of alcohol with alcohol shakers and you know, others with wine cups. And he has it, you know, you pick up your order because we're still picking up orders, but then he has all of these Father's Day baskets for sale. And I call that innovation, right?
Yeah.
Typically you don't find that in a restaurant.
Right.
But that definitely you have to look at what can you do different, or what kind of services can you add to your business model or products that make sense, you know, and
Sure.
just adapt that way, or even looking to see if there's partnering opportunities with other businesses.
That's an interesting thought as well.
Right.
Yeah. So Carmen, what are 3 takeaways for entrepreneurs to know as we begin to close this conversation?
Right. So so my advice for someone who's planning to start a business or who has a business is to make sure you're doing something that you love or you're passionate about, because then you're doing it for the right reasons. You're not doing it just to make money. And it will survive. And then you also have to have the mindset that the product or service you plan to offer has to be the best in the market, better than anything that is already out there. And that's a continuous thing that you have to always think, I got to be the best at what I do or what I'm selling, and then the other thing is, as you grow your business, you want to bring in the right expertise to the company. You don't want to compromise that. And you want to use, you know, the right resources, the right lawyers or CPAs, meaning you don't want to go cheap on things just to save money. And most important, particularly now, is that you always want to stay relevant, particularly in these changing times. And that means that perhaps down the road, you've got to change your business model, or, like I said a little bit early, introduce new products or services. And above all, you know, I think that you have to never give up and think big. That would be my last takeaway.
No, I appreciate that. Yeah, it's you know, it's not a new concept that you, as a business owner, you need to stay ahead of the curve, that you need to think ahead, you need to kind of be the first one to the product or service, if you can be, or at least have something especially innovative that you're bringing. It reminds me, you know, have you seen those shows on where they go in and rescue the restaurants and they go through the menu?
Love them. Yes, yes. Well, HGTV, that's my favorite channel. I'm passionate about interior decor and all that.
Yeah, but it's like, if you don't refresh your menu or change things up and stay, like you said, relevant, and just kind of giving your customers what they want or what they need, then if you're not refreshing and re-examining that, then, you know, a lot of times it seems that you are at risk for either not being relevant or your customers being bored or whatever. I mean, that's not new. It's just especially important now and more so going forward.
The customer experience. Yes.
Yeah, for for sure. No matter if you're in hospitality or a service business, or whatever it is that you're doing, manufacturing, it doesn't really matter. It's a relevant, universal concept. So.
Yes, I agree.
Carmen, thank you so much for
thank you too,
for your
Marnie.
time, and I have no doubt that we will have listeners who will just really appreciate some of the insights that you shared and all the experience that you've got. So happy that things are going well for you. And
Thank you, Marnie.
Yep, and I'm especially pleased that you hung in there and didn't give up, because now not only are you benefiting, but we all get to benefit from that.
Oh, that's really sweet of you. Thank you so much. I enjoyed talking to you today.
Thanks so much for taking the time to listen today. Join us next week as we hear from Ryan Moore, Chief Visionary Officer of Ryanette and Allmade Apparel, as he shares their business story, specifically on how they pivoted their business path at the onset of COVID-19. Until then, have a fantastic week.